because of the polar bears in Svalbard and regulations, we have to have a wake polar bear guard during the night. So then on our trips, we have a wake polar bear guard every second night, where you have to wake up in the middle of the night, get dressed, go outside with some heated water bottles inside your jacket, and walk around for half an hour or 2 hours and look for polar bears before you can jump in the sleeping bag and get a little bit more sleep before the morning.
Hello, intrepid listeners, and welcome to the Carpe Diem Live Your Dream podcast. I have a Norwegian guest today, Morten Rostilla, who runs an Arctic expedition guiding company. He guides ski expeditions in places like Antarctica and across the Greenland ice cap. But it was his month-long, 600-kilometer south to north ski expedition across Norway's Svalbard archipelago in the Arctic Ocean that intrigued me enough to contact him. His photos of Svalbard are simply amazing, and this episode really deserves a slideshow to go along with it. Since I don't have that, I encourage you to visit his adventure story on my website, gocarpediemnow.com, or his guiding company website, rostillaguiding.com, to see the photos. Gorgeous. Enjoy those photos, enjoy the Norwegian birds singing in the background of his recording, and enjoy the show. Hello, Morten. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, Dale.
I came across you from your beautiful website, rostillaguiding.com. It had just phenomenal photos of Svalbard, the
Yeah.
island very north of the northwest coast of Norway. And I am fascinated by that island, so I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. Before we get into that, though, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is, as you said, Morten. I'm born and raised right outside of Oslo. Uh, Spend my life in the suburbs, in the forest, fishing, cycling, being a normal kid. And decided when I was 17, 18 that I wanted to work outside, and ended up as a guide. And my job now is I guide long ski expeditions on Svalbard, Greenland, and Antarctica. And then the rest of the year, I'm answering emails and preparing for next year's expedition. Unique job, I would say, but a job that I like. That's me, very short.
I know a lot of guides, rafting guides, mountaineering guides, things like that. And you're really out there, Arctic, Greenland, Svalbard. You're in some pretty remote places of the world, some of the last really remote places, aren't you?
Yeah, it's very remote. The last trip I did, we were out for 14 days and we did not see any other people. So it's
Yeah.
quite remote. Yeah.
I want to hear a lot more about your business, your adventures. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Svalbard. It's such an amazing place, so unique. Can you just tell us a little bit about that island?
Yeah, well, Svalbard is actually an archipelago consisting of quite a lot of islands stretching from about 74 to 81 degrees north. The archipelago was discovered in 1596 by Willem Barents. It's a very, very raw Arctic wilderness and very unspoiled. You can go a lot of places where there has most likely never been people before, which is quite unique, I would say, in 2025. And the climate is quite warm compared to deep into Canada, Alaska, and Siberia. And that's because of the Gulf current that goes along the Norwegian coast up to Svalbard. So if it wasn't for the Gulf current, the entire archipelago would be covered by ice and there would be sea ice around all year round. But the Gulf current makes it livable in both summer and winter. The archipelago itself is about 60% covered by ice.
60%. That's like glacial coverage.
Yeah. So of the total land area, about 60% is covered by ice. Yeah. And the rest is just valleys and mountains.
And this is located, it's in the Barents Sea, is that correct? Right on kind of where the North Atlantic meets the Arctic Ocean?
Yeah, that's correct.
What is the temperature typically when you do your expeditions there?
What's unique about Svalbard as well is that we have the midnight sun in the spring and summer, but also complete darkness in the winter. So the sun sets sometime in October, November, and doesn't rise again until February. So then you have complete darkness. Then in February, March, the winter starts, and you can experience quite cold temperatures down to 35 degrees below zero uh,
Centigrade.
centigrade. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Uh,
cold. Yeah,
yeah.
that's really
When
cold. Yeah.
when we do our expeditions, we normally do them in April, May, where the temperature is a little bit higher, but it depends very much from year to year. I have done skiing in May where it has been raining, and also skiing in May where we have 30 degrees, 35 degrees below zero quite constantly for week on end.
Okay. You take what you get. You take
Yeah,
what Mother Nature gives you, huh?
yeah, exactly.
Well, Morten, tell us a little bit about your guiding company and some of the expeditions that you do there on Svalbard. And then we'll talk later maybe about some of your other locations, whether it's the Arctic or Greenland or wherever.
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, when I decided I wanted to work outside, I looked a little bit into what different jobs I could do and ended up pursuing a career guiding. I've guided for so many different companies throughout the years. And after working with other companies and for other companies, there was a lot of trips that I wanted to guide and that I wanted to do that nobody wanted to arrange or cooperate with. So I decided to just start my own company and do trips the way I think is best and visit the places and guide the trips I really think are the most beautiful and most unique. And so that's what I did. The main trip is the Svalbard south to north. That's our long expedition. It can be compared to a Greenland crossing or a South Pole expedition, but it's quite unique and, in my opinion, better in any way. It's tougher, colder, harder, longer than Greenland, not longer than Antarctica. But what's so unique about Svalbard is that you can do this long sea expedition at the same time as having wildlife and glaciers and mountains to look at while you're actually skiing, and that's unique in a ski expedition of that length.
Is it more varied scenery than, say, crossing Greenland?
Very much so. Yeah, a Greenland crossing, you have something to look at for 4 days in the end and 4 days in the beginning. Whereas Svalbard, the scenery changes every day and it can change multiple times every day as well, which makes it quite beautiful. And it's also a trip that is combined of a lot of different glaciers that moves separately. So no Svalbard crossing is the same. I've done the trip now 3 times and it's three different routes. And I think that's quite appealing that every time I do the trip, it's a little bit different than the year before. Whereas a Greenland crossing is the same year after year after year.
Huh. That south to north one,
Yeah,
that's that's a that's a big undertaking. That's over 600 kilometers, right?
yeah,
And you have that's over a month or about a month out on trail.
exactly.
So what does that make a typical day look like?
A typical day, we wake up at 6 o'clock and we start melting snow for breakfast and for thermos and for drink. And
You
then
you say it's 6 o'clock, but is that time of year when you do this in March or April? Is that midnight sun yet or not really?
no, the midnight sun starts the 16th of April, and for the Svalbard south to north, we start in the end of March. So it's
Hmm.
light, at 6 o'clock in the morning, but it's not, the sun hasn't risen yet in the beginning of the expedition. So you don't
Okay.
need the
So
headlamp, but it's quite cold.
so it's like that twilight in the beginning
Yeah,
days or weeks, and then by the end of it, it's light all day long, all night long.
yeah, exactly. By the end of the trip, the sun stays above the mountains even during the night.
Okay. So you get up at 6-ish and start making water.
Yeah, boiling water, drinking some coffee, and eating breakfast. The breakfast is the same. It's porridge, oatmeals, granola, powdered milk, sugar, raisins. It's a mix that everybody makes their own breakfast before the trip starts. And then about 7 o'clock, we start to tear down camp, pack up our tents in the pulkas, put on ski boots, and get ready. And at 8 o'clock, we start skiing, and that's quite thorough because of the polar bears. We have to ski as a group, so one tent can't sleep until 9. We all you can wake up earlier or later if you want, but the group, everybody has to be ready at 8 o'clock. And then we ski for the whole day, really, between 7 and 9 hours. But we divide the day up into different legs. And one leg is normally 50 minutes of skiing and a 10-minute break. So we do 7 or 8 of those legs skiing in a comfortable pace with a long lunch break. And then if it's sunny and quiet, we can take a very long lunch break of an hour or 1.5 hour. And if it's windy and cold, we'll take a shorter lunch break and just quickly eat our lunch before we continue skiing to stay warm. And then during the day, we'll take turn skiing in front. Depending on the conditions, skiing in front can be quite tough if we have to
Yeah.
plow through deep snow. So we'll take turns, and everybody does one leg in front, and then they go in the back and relax a little bit in the tracks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then at 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, we put up camp again, get all of the tents up, and start boiling water again, and have dinner. And then it's a few hours in the evening where people read a book or just sits in the tent and talk. And then every second day, it's also a polar bear guard. So because of the polar bears in Svalbard and regulations, we have to have a wake polar bear guard during the night. So then on our trips, we have a wake polar bear guard every second night, where you have to wake up in the middle of the night, get dressed, go outside with some heated water bottles inside your jacket, and walk around for half an hour or 2 hours and look for polar bears before you can jump in the sleeping bag and get a little bit more sleep before the morning.
So you do like a rotating watch schedule for that, is it? Kind of
Yeah,
like you would do at sea on a boat?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What are the showers and the baths like? Is it pretty nice?
No showers, no
I'm
baths.
kidding. I'm kidding. You can take a snow bath anytime you want, though, right?
Yeah, we tend to, especially if it's a little bit windy, we dig a wall so that we can go to the toilet behind a wall and be
Uh,
sheltered from the wind.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and then we bring some wet wipes. Uh,
yeah.
but other than that, it's saving weight all the way. So it's the same boxer shorts you wear for 30 days straight.
Yeah, which, people who've done any sort of, I'll call it hardcore camping, but I don't say hardcore to scare people off,
Nah,
but it's what you're describing is very typical for such expeditions, I guess. Yeah.
yeah.
What about the pokes, the sleds that you pull? If you're out there for a month, you're not reprovisioning halfway through, are you? Are you bringing everything from day one?
Yeah, that's a little bit unique on Svalbard because the southern part of the main island, the Spitsbergen, is a national park where nobody is allowed to drive a snowmobile. So when we do the Svalbard from south to north, We actually have to start 100 kilometers north of the southernmost point and ski down and then back up. So what we do is at our starting point, we dig down about half of our food and we dig it really deep down into the snow as a resupply.
Hmm.
Ski down to the southernmost point, turn around and ski back up, and then we dig up the food. So the trip is about 33 days, and we start with food for 17 days, and then we pick up the rest on our way north.
Yeah, that really helps save weight then, doesn't it?
Yeah, Svalbard is a lot of up and down. It's a lot of altitude meters, so having a light sled is very important and very nice.
Define light. How heavy would the typical poke be?
We try to limit the weight as much as possible. And what I tell my guests is that they should try to differentiate between luxuries and comfort because we are staying out for a month. So we can't save weight on comfort. We have to sleep well and we have to stay warm and eat well. But we don't need a lot of luxuries because it's only a month. So we try to save weight on as much as possible, but the sleds still end up weighing somewhere between 60 and 70 kilograms when we start.
Oh, okay. That's why you pull a sled and not try to carry a backpack.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's for us Americans, that's a good 150 pounds or so that you're pulling
Yeah.
uh, in the sled. Yeah, okay. Uh, would toothpaste be a luxury or a comfort?
I would consider toothpaste a comfort and a necessity.
Yeah.
Uh, it's one
Hair,
of those
hair
things.
dryers, hair
Hair
dryers,
dries,
no.
no.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sure you've seen everything, Morton. What's the most ridiculous thing you've seen someone bring on one of these expeditions?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, we have some guests on our trips in May. They'll bring headlamps, and that's quite
Oh,
fun because the sun doesn't set.
yeah,
It's not really necessary at all.
yeah.
But people get quite a thorough equipment list before the trip starts. What I see most is that people they bring a lot of stuff.
Describe your typical client, your customer. Who are the people who join these? What is it that got them to do something like this?
Our guests they come from all over the world, all different type of people. So on Svalbard, most of our guests they have already done other quite long expeditions before. They have crossed Greenland, or they have skied the Northwest Passage, or they've skied to the South Pole, or similar expeditions, and they've asked themselves, "What's next? I want to do something that's a little bit more challenging. What should I do now?" And then they come to us. So these people they like the simplicity. I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy as well. Life boils down to being very, very simple. We're eating, sleeping, and moving. That's it.
Yeah.
And people really like to not have all those other stressful aspects in the day. So my guests normally they're quite experienced and they're just looking to being out for 30 days or 35 days straight and uh, moving through scenery and moving through nature. There are a lot of people who do expeditions who see it as sort of a challenge, but the Svalbard archipelago is not really that famous for anybody. So it's sort of a place that you have to know of to go there. Greenland or Antarctica is much more famous, and I think Greenland and Antarctica are more challenges that appeal to a lot of people. Although in my personal experience as well, but is much tougher.
Well, I think when you say appeal to people, you might have said it. It's maybe more that it has, it's more well known. The Arctic, Antarctic, Greenland, they're more marquee expedition destinations because people know of them.
Exactly.
I think is what you're saying.
Yeah,
And Svalbard, just for whatever reason, isn't as well known.
exactly.
And your website makes this pretty clear. These are not your average ski trips, right?
No,
These are some serious expeditions that really require someone in physical shape with experience in that type of environment. I'm sure you do a bit of a vetting process to make sure that someone's not getting in over their head as they sign up for these. But what do you look for in a guest before you accept them on a trip like that? You don't want someone to get out there 3 days later and say, you know, Morton, this really isn't for me. I want out.
so that's also one of the things where Svalbard is quite unique in that when you start an expedition, and I compare Svalbard a lot with Greenland and Antarctica, and that's just because those are the two other places that's most similar. Svalbard is quite unique in that it's quite easy to abort the trip, and it's also quite cheap.
Oh,
If you
okay.
find out on Greenland on day 10 that this is not for you, it's 15, $20,000.
10 days back to camp
Yeah,
or to town.
yeah.
Yeah.
But on Svalbard, if you find out on day 10 or 12 that this is not for you, we're already on our way back north from the southernmost point, and we've crossed the national park border, and getting a snowmobile out and picking you up is not a big issue at all. So in that sense, Svalbard is quite easy,
Uh-huh.
but we try to uh, when we have new bookings coming in, guests they tell us what kind of experience they have before, and if they have little or no experience, it's mandatory to join a weekend of training in Norway before the trip starts,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that's free. It's included in the price of the trip. But then they would come to Norway and they would practice skiing and putting up the tent and stoves and all of those aspects of the trip that we would meet on Svalbard. And they would also get my opinion on their physical shape, uh,
Hmm.
because I don't want guests to pay a lot of money and then coming in day 3 or 4 having to cancel it because they didn't know what they were getting into.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fortunately for me, as I said, a lot of my guests they do have quite a lot of previous experience, so they know what they are getting into. Uh, they know how much to train because they have crossed Greenland before or done something similar.
Yeah.
We focus on the physical side of the preparations. If the guests are physically fit and they work out a lot, 6 to 9 months is normal enough to prepare for an expedition like this. As for the experience in staying outdoors, we don't require guests to have a ton of experience in winter camping. That's sort of why I am there. I know how to fix the equipment and how everything works. So I'll be able to explain all of that before we leave. We'll test all of the gear. And as I mentioned earlier too as well, that we focus on having a lot of time, which means that the first few days skiing will sort of get a little bit into the rhythm with the equipment and the routines and all of that.
This podcast, of course, is meant to inspire people to go out and do things like this.
Mm,
And yet, every such experience has two sides to it, the really enjoyable and the really not so enjoyable. So, can you just take a moment and describe what you think some of the worst parts of an experience like this are and what the best parts are? And hopefully, the best parts outweigh the worst.
Yeah, I think for such very, very long trips, normally and luckily, the worst part is the end of it when the expedition stops, which
Ooh, good
uh,
answer.
I'm quite glad. Uh, I would much rather have an expedition end and all of my guests saying that we could have happily continued for another week than having an expedition end and all of my guests saying we're so happy this is over.
Thank God
Uh,
it's over. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, that's a good answer.
but there are, of course, tough. Uh, Everybody have their ups and downs, and we try to be quite transparent when we are in a trip like that. We are 8 or 9 people, and except the mountains and the glaciers and the valleys, the only thing we have to look at is ourselves. So keeping something hidden is very, very hard. If you have a bad day, everybody notices, and that can sometimes be difficult and tricky for people to accept help when they have that one day where they didn't get good sleep or the body just isn't working. And then, of course, when it's 30 degrees below zero and a little bit of wind, waking up at 2 o'clock to go outside and stand polar bear guard for an hour is not super comfortable, but
Yeah.
the job has to be done.
Well, at least you're not at risk of falling asleep out there. Well, maybe you are if it's that cold. I don't know.
We try to we take a lot of precautions to make sure that everybody stays as warm as possible on the polar bear guard.
Yeah.
And
What
if I
go ahead.
can move on to the positives, because that's connected actually. We get a lot of positive feedback on the polar bear guard, because that's the only time you're really and truly alone. And a lot of our guests, they report that they really get to see the nature and appreciate it, and they get time to reflect and think when they're outside and wandering in the middle of the night and the sun goes behind the mountains and rises again. So that's one of the polar bear guard is one of those things where a lot of guests they're skeptical about it before the trip starts, and it's one of those things where a lot of people have a very, very positive experience after the trip has finished.
I'm really glad you said that because I would not have necessarily thought of that, but it reminds me I've crossed the Atlantic twice in a sailboat and the night watch, some people just don't like it, but it was probably my favorite time at sea. You're alone on deck, just you and the vast dark ocean with the stars. And it was the
Yeah,
most, I don't know, the most alive feeling you could possibly have. You feel so small and so big at the same time in the universe. It's just, yeah, it's a beautiful time to reflect.
exactly. And yeah, it's a beautiful
Huh.
thing being alone in the nature. We have on Svalbard quite a lot of wildlife as well. So you can experience when you're standing polar bear guard that reindeer or polar fox or ptarmigans or other animals come close out of pure curiosity, and that's a quite unique experience, I think, to be alone out there and a few reindeers come and check you out. It's a
Huh.
nice
Yeah. Yeah.
experience.
You've mentioned polar bears multiple times, and I would imagine that a lot of our listeners, that would be a fear
Yeah,
and something that might prevent them from traveling someplace like the Arctic. And then I'm sure there's other dangers, crevasses in the glaciers, I don't know, avalanche risk, or I don't know if you're ever going over sea ice, whatever. But of course, there's going to be risks and dangers, but just do describe some of the risks that there are, how you take precautions, how big is that risk really?
Yeah, so that's sort of my job to mitigate risk with the polar bear. We do everything we can to avoid areas where there normally are polar bears and plan every aspect of the trip to to avoid it. And it's quite successful. I have guided now 37 ski trips and ski expeditions on Svalbard. And on those trips, I have only seen polar bear once. Whereas when I'm guiding sailing trips or snowmobiling or kayaking or other trips close to the coast, we see polar bears quite often. Uh, so that's
Only
quite unique.
once out of 37 ski trips. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
because that,
that's
that that's my job, right? Like one way I could describe it is that if my job was to show my guests polar bear, we would have seen polar bears. But my job
yeah.
is to avoid it, and I do everything I can to avoid it. Svalbard
What
is,
do you have a polar bear radar?
yeah, well, like the polar bear they eat seal, and the seal is on sea ice. So like if you just try to stay away from the sea ice, you're normally
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
good. Uh,
yeah,
but there are a bunch of stuff that we do to avoid it. As
yeah,
an example, we try to not camp closer to the sea ice than 5 kilometers.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and then it
Makes
depends
sense.
where we move, will depend on where the wind direction is.
Oh,
Sea ice,
yeah,
so a lot of things go into planning these trips to avoid it. And Svalbard is
yeah,
so beautiful and it's so magnificent and so much other stuff to look at that we don't really need to see the polar bears to have a good time.
yeah. Morton, I've done a lot of camping in my life in different environments. I think my favorite experiences have generally been in the winter, and the most memorable, the most favorably memorable experiences have been in winter camping in the snow. And yet, most people don't want to do that or never want to try that. And so, not talking about an Arctic expedition, Svalbard, 40 days, but just one night in a tent in the winter, or just 2 days out snowshoeing or skiing someplace with a pack on your back. What would you say to inspire people to just go try something small like that?
I think people are quite afraid of going out in the winter. In the summer, if your tent breaks or your stove doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. You'll find water. And whereas in the winter, the consequences could be quite severe if things go really south. But I would say to just, if you are afraid or cautious, don't go very far. Go a few hundred meters. Doesn't need to be longer from the car or from a hut. And yeah, just give it a try. It's not
Yeah.
dangerous if you have a backup plan. When I started going outside in the winter, my first trips and my first nights outside were places where I could easily, anytime during the night, have just packed up my back and gone
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 home.
back.
Yeah. Yeah. My first night winter camping was in my backyard.
Yeah, and I think by doing it gradually, I think that would make people safer.
Yeah.
Start slow.
Morton, let's step away from Svalbard for a moment or step away from your guided trips. Tell us a little bit about one of your favorite expeditions. And I'm thinking probably it's one where you didn't have to deal with guests. Just tell us one of the really cool trips that you've taken.
Yeah, I've done a few trips. I would mention my the toughest expedition I've done. When I decided I wanted to become a guide, I was pretty thorough on what I needed to know and what I needed to learn. So when I was 23 years old, I spent the entire month of December in northern Norway, skiing alone in the dark season, hauling a sled that was over 110 kilograms. The goal of the trip was to challenge myself mentally, and I really managed to do that. It was a very challenging trip in every aspect. It was very heavy. It was dark. I did not meet a lot of people, and I took very few photos. I only took 30 photographs on a trip that was 33 days. But anytime I look back at those photos now, each one tells a very unique story, and it brings me back, and it's a trip I think about every now and then. There can be situations now where I'm really not enjoying, where I can think to myself that okay, it's cold, but that's at least it's not as cold as Finnmarksvidda 15 years ago.
It helps to have some of those really tough ones to make the other ones seem not so bad, right?
Yeah,
I would imagine in the darkness of winter and the cold, I would imagine that the mental fortitude of a trip like that, especially solo, is probably harder than the physical aspect.
yeah, it is, and that was the goal of the trip as well. It was a good moment for learning. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm gonna go uh, alone skiing in northern Norway next December. Probably not any December.
Some
But
things are better done just once in life.
exactly.
Yeah. What do you think Svalbard will be like 20 years from now or 50 years from now? What ways do you think it'll change?
A good question. I think it'll be less ice, quite a lot less ice, and I think, or I know, the archipelago will gain more islands. There are a lot of places where there are pieces of land connected by bridges of ice, and those bridges are
Mm,
melting slowly. So in 10, 20 to 50 years, a lot of those will be gone, and Svalbard south to north, for example, will be about 200 kilometers shorter than it is today. It's so high up north that Svalbard is very affected by climate change. A lot of changes happening very fast.
you're seeing it, and it's sad, I'm sure, but
Yeah,
uh, yeah. Well, before I ask my last question, just remind our listener. I would encourage them to go out to your website. The photographs are just gorgeous. You have a very nice website. What is
thank
that
you.
site for people?
My website is Rostille Guiding, Rostille Guiding. Guess you'll have to pronounce it. Your
Well,
English pronunciation will be better
I
than
would
mine.
say, yeah, Rostilleguiding.
Yeah,
Rostilla Guiding is very, very well laid out. And
thank
I
you.
would encourage people to just have, not many are going to go do a month-long expedition for a lot of money, but at least getting out to try a night of winter camping is well worth the experience. My last question for you, Morten, as it is for all of my guests, what is your next big dream adventure that you would love to pursue?
Well, the one thing I really enjoy doing in my free time is trout fishing in the Norwegian mountain in the summer. And just in a few weeks, I will be in the mountains with my fishing rod and my dog, and that's my dream.
Well, Morten, thank you. Thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot. And as I hinted to you when I first connected, I'm really tempted. I'm really tempted. You might see me signing up on one of your expeditions someday because it is very appealing.
Thank you. I hope you do. I haven't had any guests on a trip yet that haven't said that it wasn't worth the money. It's a beautiful place.
All right. Well, you have a good day. Thank you much.
Thank you too.
Thanks for listening to the Carpe Diem Live Your Dream podcast. If you like the show, there's nothing more valuable to me than you following it and sharing it with others. I drop a new episode every Friday, so tune in again for another great adventure story. And check out the accompanying website, www.gocarpediemnow.com, and then go seize the day and live your dream.